Hey there, Prayer Plant Girl here. One of my most watched videos is how to prepare and store begonias, tuberous begonias, for the winter. So I'm about to be going through this, these pots here that have these beautiful yellow begonias on them. I can't remember the name, I'll find the tag in here eventually. I have 3 hanging baskets of these. And then I have a couple more varieties of begonias around my yard I'm going to be cleaning up today. I always get a lot of questions on that video, so I thought, while I'm doing this cleanup, I'll go through, I'll try and answer some of your questions and show you some of the things that I'm doing just as a bit of a refresher for cleaning up and different things that you could do to get your begonias stored away for the winter. So let's get these beautiful flower pots cleaned out and put away. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is just cutting all these plants back, and I know that's going to be painful for some people to watch, and you're going to say, why are you doing this? They're still blooming and beautiful and looking great. But I live in Saskatchewan, Canada. We are in the very last days of September here, well past our average last frost date. We have not had any frost yet. And a lot of times our weather can change very quickly from almost summer-like to very winter. And if I leave these out much longer, I'm worried we're going to get not just a frost, but a hard freeze. And I'm going to lose these plants entirely. Whereas if I start cleaning them up now, I can put them away, I can kind of force them into dormancy and avoid losing the plants altogether. It would be ideal, yes, to leave them and get a nice light frost on them and have them die back naturally, but that's just not looking like it's going to happen this year, and so I'm going to have to take matters into my own hands. Is it hard to do? Yes. Look at these plants. They're beautiful. They're gorgeous. I want to be able to enjoy these. The truth of the matter is, I'm not out here very much anymore because although it's still warm out, I mean, I'm in a sweatshirt. It's not great. It's very windy this time of year, and I have other things going on in my life that's keeping me out of the yard this time of year. So it's time to cut these back. The first thing we're doing is just going through and trying to get out the excess plants. I also have petunias, geraniums, all sorts of things in here. So I'm just cutting everything out of my way so I can kind of see what I'm doing. Now I cut the water to these plants last week, early this week. This is Saturday, so it was like something like Monday that I cut the water off to these pots. So they're getting dried out. They're starting to realize that the growing season is over. So that's one of the first steps to kind of tricking them into dormancy, is to just take away their water, you stop fertilizing. So this is the main begonia I have in here. I still haven't found the tag, but I love these yellows. There was some Fiona whites on the side. I'll grab those in a minute. But now this kind of separated out and I can see. I'm just going to take some of this top foliage off here. I had a lot of comments on these from everyone who came to my yard this year. Everyone loved them, gave some away to friends this spring. Okay, so now I'm going to take, you see the ladybugs everywhere here? The garden's just full of them. So now I'm going to try and dig down here carefully without damaging more than just roots. Try and keep these stems intact as much as possible. Everything's pretty packed in here. There we go. So this lifted out, maybe. Yeah. So I can pull this off. I'm trying to remember if these have a tuber or not. It's still pretty damp in here, I'm surprised. Oh, here. This was Double Delight Primrose. So set that to the side. Now, I'm going to wash this off just to show you and get a better idea. Normally I don't wash them off, but I'm gonna get a bucket and I'll just wash this off a little bit and we'll see what's in here. So let's rinse this off. I just put a little water in this tub here. Hopefully we can get a look at what's going on so you can see. Okay, so hopefully you can see here. I can't quite see what you're seeing, but if I pull this apart a little bit, this looks to me like tuberous. Now, I grew a bunch of these from cuttings years ago, a couple of years ago, and they've been living just in my basement on my grow shelves for years. So that's why I'm just not entirely sure what I have here, because I can't remember. And they don't produce anything for a couple of years. So this looks like the beginning of a very small tuber. And I don't know how well you can see this here. Let's see what you're seeing. But like, normally it's fairly fleshy, but I think because it's so young, it's a little bit harder because it's not like a long, skinny. There's rhizomatis begonias, fibrous begonias, and tuberous begonias. So there's 3 different kind of main types. The rhizomatis is kind of like a long root that grows along the ground, and you get shoots coming off of it. The tuberous is kind of a more kind of rounded, oblong shape, flattened tuber, kind of like a potato, and it'll be kind of concave in the middle where the stems come out, and then the roots come out the bottom. And it's usually fairly fleshy and soft. Now this is quite hard, but it's there was still a lot of moisture in the ground there, so they haven't dried up yet, and I think that's why, and it's young, so I think that's why it's so firm still. Let's see. So there's a few here, but they seem to be like, they're separate pieces. They're not all connected together from what I can tell. So I think these are tubers. I was hoping, I know the lighting's not great. I was hoping to get more soil off so we could see better, but it's just not cleaning off well. I don't know if you can see here, like this one wants to separate out. The roots are all entangled, but it wants to come off the rest. And it doesn't feel like it's breaking off any more than roots. Like it's not like it's one long rhizome connected, I don't think. But it has a similar stem, so I'm not positive myself even. But with something this small anyways, oops, I would, I'll just replant these and take them inside under my grow lights. So we're gonna set these to the side, we'll keep digging them out, we'll look for other varieties. So now we have, over here on the sides, there's Fiona White. So try and get these pulled up and we'll have a look at what they contain under the ground. Okay, so that's the geranium and this is the begonia here. Pull the excess soil off. And now this one, pretty sure is fibrous. Stem's breaking. So I'm gonna go rinse this and then I'll bring it back and show you what it looks like. I'm pretty sure this is a fibrous begonia and I'll tell you what we can do with that. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to see this a little better over here. I think the lighting's a bit better. So with this begonia, when you wash the soil away and you look at just what's there for the roots, it is basically roots. Like what's growing underground is just roots coming off of the stems. It's not like there's one kind of fleshy root, like kind of like you might see on an iris or a canna. It's not like one kind of big fat root going horizontally that these roots are coming off of. They're just coming right off the stems, and what's underground is root. So this, where you have just the roots coming off, this is your fibrous begonia. So this is typical of the kind of begonias you're going to see when you buy bedding plants. So this kind of begonia, if you're going to try and overwinter it, you need to really pot it up and bring it in and kind of let it go into dormancy, pot it in its soil, and then come back. They don't always come back as well. And what I do is I don't put it into full dormancy. I just have had them in small, like 3-inch containers on a shelf with grow lights. And they've just been growing there, and they're not watered very often, like maybe once a month, a little bit of water over the winter, just enough to kind of keep them alive. They'll drop their leaves. They get leggy. I trim them way back, and they just kind of are in survival mode. But that's enough to kind of get them through the winter indoors, and then I can bring them back out. Like I said, it's not fail-proof, but it can help you to do that. So I need to collect all of these up. I'm going to clean out the rest of these pots, and then I'll bring you back and we'll look at some of the other types of begonias that I have growing in my yard. Okay, before I pull this last pot of plants apart here, I wanted to show you, I think this one will be good. I collected seed from these bedding plant begonias this year, and I've never done this before, and I don't really know how they're going to turn out for growing. They make these little seed pods like this, and then if you pull it open, it's really, really tiny. So I don't even know if it'll focus, but there's just like a ton of I don't know if you can see the dust falling out of that. It's easier to see. I have a pink variety I'll try and show you. So these don't really show up, but it's just like the most minuscule dust, I don't know if you can see that on my thumbnail there. That's the seeds. So there's like thousands probably in one of these little seed pouches. I don't know how they're going to do, but I thought it would be something fun for me to try. So I do have some seeds saved from these, but I'm also going to be saving the plants and overwintering those as well, and we'll just see where we get with both of those things. But I'll finish taking this last pot apart. I just wanted to show you that, and I'll try and remember to show you on the pink. I have the same variety in a pinky color, and I think the seeds, if I remember, were kind of a darker color. You might be able to see them better. And here I unearthed the grower tag. I knew I had it in here somewhere. So from these yellow, so they were originally a plant I'd purchased, but I've propagated them with cuttings, and now I have quite a few. Now, I believe you could save these geraniums indoors and overwinter them too, but they're really easy to start from seed. And I've never done it before, so I don't really know, but I think you just cut them back, pot them, and grow them indoors under lights. Let them go dormant for a while and then bring them out into light. Same idea as the begonias if you're growing them in pots. But again, I've never done it myself, so I can't say for sure. So there, all 3 of those pots are cleaned out. So now let's go find some more begonias to dig up. So now we have this big pot. It's beautiful. It's 2 big cannas in it. I got my cannas started a bit late this year, so some of them didn't bloom, but that's okay. We'll store them away this year, and I'll just try not to forget about taking them out next year a little earlier. But here we have this beautiful begonia here. Let's see if I have the tag for it in here anywhere. I'm not seeing it. I might come across it still. But we're going to pull that out. And then there's, again, some of those what do I call them, Fiona Whites in there, and I'll have to get the canna out. We'll just pull everything apart, make a big mess just like we just did, and get this all ready for winter. But it's going to be the exact same thing as far as pulling it apart, except a little more difficult because these cannas probably have a pretty large root system in here, and it might be a bit of a fight to get this out. But I'm going to wrangle these out, and then we'll have a look at these begonias and see what varieties they are and go from there. Oh, I have a little tag in here. This is Begonia Double Pink, so I'm guessing that's not an official name, just something I named it to keep track of the tuber, which I'm guessing it's a tuber by the looks of the begonia flowers. This one might have been in that video. I actually got the garden hose out to kind of clean this one off, really to try and give you the best idea. It's really hard to describe a tuber on a begonia, and honestly, even I normally would wait for my begonia to dry right down. I would leave all the soil and everything on it before I would see the tuber, and then I would just knock all the loose dirt off of it. So I don't normally even see them like this, so even for me it's a little bit odd, but it's just because I'm not used to seeing them still so fresh looking. But you can see like kind of the shape. It's kind of round, kind of oblong, but flatter, right? Like it's not a sphere, it's flattened out. And then most of the stems are coming kind of from the center of it, which would be a depression in the middle where they're coming out of. So that's a tuberous begonia there. So you can save this by putting it in like just like moist wood chips or vermiculite, or some people just wrap them in paper, shredded paper. I've even just set mine some years on top of the vermiculite or whatever that I'm saving my dahlias and cannas in, and just put them in a dark, cool spot, like 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, and just stored them like that once all these stems have come off. And when it's ready to be stored, the stems will just kind of pop off. It's like super, super easy. They just kind of fall away. They're dried and shriveled up at the bottoms, and they're just ready to come off. It won't look anything like this. So that's how you know when it's ready. So until that, I'll just set these usually in a kind of a cooler, dark spot, but not that 5 to 10 degree spot, just because I don't have that usually quite yet. But I usually just kind of in my garage and under some newspaper, and let them dry back and save them like that. Or you can take them, have them either pot them up like this, or leave them in their pots if you have them potted already. Take them inside. If you have somewhere nice and cool, again, it should be around that 10 degrees if you can, but not necessarily required. And just let them die back naturally. Like stop watering them, let them dry off, cut all the dried off foliage and stems and everything above soil. And let them sit like that for a few months, and then you would reintroduce them to the light and the water and let them sprout back up in the late winter. So it's 2 different ways you can store your tuberous begonias. So I need to set this with the tag, and we'll keep pulling this pot apart. It actually looks like I might be able to pull the begonias off from around the middle and come back to the canna. The canna, I find, can take a little bit more of the cold weather, and I would rather work on cannas and dahlias and things another day and just kind of get my begonias done today. So I'm going to see if I can just kind of gently tease this pot apart a little bit. So this is another pink double delight that I just pulled out of the other side of this pot here. And it was one that I obviously grew from cuttings. It has a lot of vermiculite that was around the roots. See that soil there? How much, or perlite, I guess. How much white is in there? That's perlite, and I had a lot in some of those pots. And you can see, hopefully, there's not really a tuber forming yet. There's a little bit of a larger growth starting there, but nothing else. I don't want to disturb the roots much more than I already have. I'll pot this in a pot and put it on my grow shelf under some lights, and I'll just let it kind of die back over the next few months, just lessening the water it gets. And then I will, again in like late winter, I'll start watering it again and let it grow on again. So once it gets to where it's kind of died right back, it doesn't need the lights on anymore. And then once I want it to start growing again, I'll turn the lights back on and start giving it more water. But it doesn't have enough tuber to survive over the winter like this. So that's what I'll do if I want to keep this over the winter. There's a couple more pots down here that have some Fiona double pinks and whites, and then we'll have all the begonias pulled up. I absolutely love these pots all summer. These are they just get like morning sun, and only a couple of hours of morning sun, which there's cannas in here and they didn't flower and they stayed fairly small. And that's kind of what I expected. I would just get the leafy growth out of these because they're not getting a lot of sun, and cannas need a lot of sun. But it gave me that nice height and texture that I wanted in here to contrast with the more finer, delicate look of these Fiona, I think these are pink and Fiona white begonias here. And then I did have some blue lobelia in the bottom through much of the summer. spring and summer, but it started to kind of brown and not look as nice later in the season, so I just pulled it out, and they still look fabulous even with it gone. So this is a really great combination. I would recommend for kind of a morning sun area would be great, and I think they could even take filtered light or sun. I don't think the begonias would like super hot sun in the afternoon. They are a warm season crop, warm weather crop, but I think the intense sun in the late afternoon might be tough on them in warmer areas, but definitely part sun areas to morning sun areas would be great for this combination. So I'm just going to be pulling these out just like all the rest, trying to leave the cannas again, like I said, and then we'll sit down and answer some questions. There always seems to be lots of begonia questions, so now I need to be kind of strategic or else I'm going to get these mixed up. So this one was a pink one. The weather's just so cool that even though I cut this water off almost a whole week ago, these are still quite damp. Found the tags. So Fiona Rose is what those kind of pinky colored ones are. That's why I always leave my tags in my pots. Some people can remember the varieties and everything, but I can't. I grow too much and I just can't keep track of it all. So for me, I just tuck the tags somewhere inconspicuous down deep in the soil, and then I know what I have in case I want to save it or recreate that look another year. And I just remembered I was going to try and show you the seeds in these rose begonias here to hopefully you can see them better. So again, it's just a little seed head it creates. Oops. And then when you pull it open, and these aren't maybe quite mature. I had trouble finding seeds on this one. But you can see that there, how it's just like covered in those little kind of specks. That's the seeds. So when I was collecting earlier, when this was more dried up, they were a darker color on this variety, but sorry, my fingernails are disgusting. But so you can just see just how many seeds. I think you can see that. I almost forgot about this hanging basket that has begonias in it. They're not looking like much yet. I cut the water to this pot the same time I cut to the others, but because it's a hanging basket and it's a cocoa lined one, I don't know how you can see that. So it's really dried out quickly, and that was one of the reasons I really thought I better get on this and get this done. So this is a beautiful, beautiful begonia. It's a trailing, hanging begonia. Begonia Begonia cream. I have the real tag in the house somewhere. Again, grew this from cuttings, and it's a gorgeous, you can't tell right now, but it's a very like narrow leaf and a beautiful hanging flower. Kind of reminds me of a fuchsia. Again, I gave a few of these away this year. And you know, I have a yellow tuberous begonia somewhere, but I'm not sure where, and I'm wondering, I did a pot up for my mom, and I usually put yellow flowers in it, so I'm thinking it might be out at her house. So she doesn't save her tubers and things, so I might have to give her a call and see if she's dumped that pot yet. Maybe we can get them and do it up for her again next year. So I'm just taking the chain off of this hanging pot so I can get in here a little better. It's osteospermum in the middle, growing up for kind of the thriller. And it looks a little out of proportion now, but for most of the summer, it was looking really nice with that combination. So snips. I'm gonna try and pull these, cut these back and pull these out. There was some petunias in here too, so I better be careful what I pull here. This is so dry. that was a struggle. Okay, I'm gonna go rinse one of these off so you can have a good look. 'Cause this looks like a good example of tuberous that's dried up a bit. So here's that Begonia cream begonia, and I went and rinsed it off under the hose. And you can see that swollen tuber, swollen root. This one's a little rounder than I usually see them, but you can see how all the stems are kind of coming out of one spot. So that's your sign that it's a tuberous begonia. Now this formed a really nice big tuber. That's probably because it was in a hanging basket, so it was a little deprived for things like nutrients and water over the summer. So it's going to really start working on that storage system so that it's trying to give itself a little survival mechanism there. You can maybe see there's a few more kind of developing on the side as it started to spread out. So that's a begonia with a tuber on it that just came out of the ground. So anyone that was wanting to see an example of that there, I think I found you a pretty decent example to go by when you're digging yours up. It can be a little tricky to tell, so there you go. So there we are. I have dug up 5 varieties of begonias here today that I'm going to be overwintering in one method or another, and hopefully they'll all make a reappearance next spring. So we have some fibrous begonias, and those are my Fiona White and Fiona Rose. And then what did we decide? These yellow ones, these Primrose Delight, these were a tuberous. They had small tubers on them. And we had the, what was this? The double pinks, and then the Begonia cream. And those last 3 were all tuberous. Now some of them, because I had grown a lot of these, in fact, all of these I think have been grown from a cutting, or some of them might have been the original plant, and then they had like this double pink, I think might be an original with some cutting beside it. So definitely you can grow them from cuttings. But so any that don't have a good tuber on them, and most of my tuberous ones don't have a very large tuber, so I'll just be planting those up in a pot, along the same with the fibrous, planting them in pots. And they don't need a big pot, just a small pot. If with fresh soil, you could bring in your old soil, but I just think that's looking for more disease to come in. So just plant them up in a pot, and you want them to just die back. So you could be reducing the amount of light that they're getting throughout the day and the amount of water, or you could just throw them straight into some darkness and dryness. So it depends how much you want to kind of just slowly get them acclimated to that. I'll probably just back off on light and water, and then eventually just turn my grow lights off altogether, somewhere cool for a few months, and then I'll wake them back up again in the late winter. I won't give them a very long dormant phase. I find they grow quite well without very much. They do need to die back, but then you can basically just bring them back. So like even a month or 2 is plenty. The ones that go into cold storage, again, a couple of months, you can bring them out late winter, or you can bring them out sooner and get them going. Depends how big and full of a plant you want by the time you're ready to plant and when your frost-free time is, because none of these can be planted out in the spring before you're definitely past frost and into some warmer days, and above like 5 Celsius nights is ideal. So questions. Like I said, that last video I did a few years ago had a lot of questions. One of the main questions I got a lot of is, if you grow a tuberous begonia from a cutting, will you get a tuber? And I showed you one here. Was it these guys? The answer is yes, but it'll start off very small. So it might take a few seasons of growing to get a good sized tuber. Like oftentimes if you buy tubers in the store, they're about like this big, you know, I don't know, like 4 centimeters across or so. And that's kind of what you're aiming for the very smallest, I would say, to overwinter. And then that's the point where you could start letting them dry out and overwintering and feeling pretty secure that they should come back for you. Anything smaller than that, I would just pot up and grow on over the winter, or let go into dormancy in a pot and then bring back, because I think it'll just get too dry. It'd be too difficult to keep the moisture levels at the point they want to come back from a very, very small tuber. The tuber is made to help them survive dry times and low fertility, but they need to have a chance. So that would be my answer to that. So there's a few people that ask, they're in like parts of Canada where they have like, say, a garage that maybe is insulated but not heated, but they don't have a cold space that is completely frost free, and they're wondering if they could store their tubers like that. I would say if you want to take a chance, you could build a small box with some insulation in it and then put your tubers in there and keep it kind of towards the middle of the room somewhere. Or if your garage is connected to your house, maybe near the connection point to your house where the walls and things might be a little bit warmer, and up off the floor, the air is going to be warmer the higher you go. And you could try like that. It has to be something that can breathe. It can't be like a plastic container that's going to get really wet inside. And I would check on them often. And I would keep an eye on the temperatures in there, and maybe it's going to get a really cold night. Maybe you bring them in if you're in a part of Canada where it's not staying like super frozen all the time, and it's just really some really cold nights where your garage might freeze. Maybe just pull it into your house for the night and then back into the garage for the cool time after that, just to keep them from freezing. There's no guarantee with that, but that's something I might try if I was in that situation. Here in Saskatchewan, if you had even an insulated garage, if it wasn't heated, it's going to freeze and freeze solid day and night for months. So that wouldn't be an option for us here. But in some areas like Toronto, BC, and some parts of BC and different parts of Canada where it doesn't get quite as cold, you might be able to get away with that. Another question I had, these are in no particular order, I just went through the questions that were on that video, is, and I answered this already, is why do I cut them back when they're still in full bloom and looking beautiful and looking wonderful? And that's because we could very quickly go from the very cold, or sorry, from the very warm to the very cold here this time of year, and that will destroy the tubers if they freeze. And so if we have where all of a sudden we get snow, because we could go, we've done that before, where we get snow and freezing temperatures for a few days when we've been out in like shorts the day before. So I want to be careful with these. They're not as hardy. Like my dahlias could take a little bit of that being inside that large soil in a pot or in the ground, and the same with the cannas. I find they can take a little bit of that, but the begonias are much more tender, and they just can't handle that. So I want to make sure they're dug up and safe before we get the really cold weather. So I'm distracted by all the birds in the yard. Someone asked me if begonias can grow in Texas. I don't know. They are a heat zone, like I think it's 8 to 11 plant, depending on the variety and the type of begonia. I really don't know what your heat zone is in Texas, and I don't know the answer to that, but check your heat zones. They don't like to be in temperatures over 30 Celsius for very long periods of time. You know, a few days might be okay as long as it's cooling down at night. Like here we get above 30, but it always cools down at night. So they get that little reprieve in the night before it gets really hot during the day again. So we can do that, but we don't have like weeks and weeks and weeks of like around 30 or warmer temperatures day and night. So I can't speak to that, but it's something you'd have to ask at your local garden centers and nurseries, and if they're selling them, then you probably can. Are all begonias tuberous? Well, I've already answered that. We have the fibrous begonias that are these, like the bedding plant type begonias that you'll find in the nurseries. They'll be sold in like packs of multiples oftentimes, and they have usually a more delicate flower, or I think a little bit rounder leaf, but they're a fibrous begonia. They're usually sold as bedding plants. Let me see. Oh, and wax begonias are also a fibrous begonia. I wrote that down because I don't really know much about wax begonias. Then you have what's considered more of a rhizomatous begonia, and that's similar to tuberous, and sometimes they're clumped together, the rhizomatous and the tuberous, but your rex begonia would have more of a rhizome than a tuber on it, so it'd be more a longer underground kind of fleshy, it's almost like a taproot, but it grows sideways, and the plants would kind of start to sprout off of that down that rhizome. And if I understand correctly, the rex begonia is one of those that does that. And then you have your tuberous begonias, which is those like I showed you with that kind of ball-shaped, kind of round or disc-shaped modified root at the bottom. It's kind of starchy, tuberous, kind of like a potato, or I have even in my comments kind of said, like, if you thought of like a giant raisin once they're dried out, it's kind of like that kind of shape, and it's usually has like a little dip in the middle at the top. So that would be that dipped part is where the stems would come out of when it starts to grow, and the bottom, more rounded part is where the roots would come out of. The roots will come kind of everywhere, but you'll get more of them out the bottom. Is the storage system the same for your begonias as it is for your cannas and your dahlias and your geraniums and all sorts of things? Well, I got all sorts of questions that had some sort of plant in there with that. Geraniums, I think I touched on that a little bit. I don't really know the best storage. I think they need to be grown in pots under lights. I don't even know if they need a dormant period. I've never done it myself, so I can't say for sure. Cannas and dahlias, they want to go dormant, and you store them in a damp vermiculite, peat moss, wood shavings kind of situation. And I find dahlias especially are a little more susceptible to drying out in storage than the cannas and the begonias, but they are similar, but not quite the same. Begonias, I have found I can even just set on top of that medium in my cool, dark spot, and they're usually fine to bring back out the next year, even if they dry out quite a bit. Cannas can actually take quite a bit of drying. Dahlias, they're kind of that Goldilocks plant. They can't get too wet and they can't get too dry. So you just have to be careful, but they all want that cool, dark location. And yeah, a month or two for sure for all of them, I would say. Well, for the cannas and the dahlias, they need that little rest. And then some of your plants that you might collect up, the like Acidanthera, Crocosmia, Ranunculus, Anemones, those can just be stored dried. Take the stems and leaves off and just stored dry in, it doesn't even have to be a super cool place, but just a dark place, a little cooler than maybe what you would want in your household, like below 20 Celsius. 15 or lower is probably even better, but you just throw them in a bunch of like stockings or mesh bags and hang them up somewhere, and they'll be good to go the next year. So they just don't want to freeze. So they're all stored just a little bit differently, but the things that store them the most similarities in their storage would be the begonias with the dahlias and the cannas, in my experience. I had someone say they dug up their begonias and they couldn't see a tuber, just a glob of roots. So they're like, is that what I'm supposed to be seeing? So that's why I washed some of these off, because I had a lot of questions about that. What does it look like? And like I showed you, like some of them, even if it's a tuberous begonia, if it was sold as a plant that had been started from a cutting, then it might not have developed much of a tuber this year. It might take like 3-4 seasons to actually get a good tuber on it. So if you can't see, like I said, a good sized tuber that's, several inches, 3 to 4, or like 4 centimeters or so across, then you should just be overwintering that in soil if you're going to overwinter it, and trying to keep it growing on and getting larger. I don't think it'll have enough energy in that tiny little pea-sized tuber, if there's one there at all, to overwinter it. Same with the fibrous begonias, you're going to need to plant them and grow them that way. So I would just treat anything that you can't see has a tuber on it. And if you have to rinse it, just let it dry out a bit. But if you can't see a tuber on it, then just treat it like almost like a house plant that you're going to let go dormant for a little while and then wake up again. And then the last question I have is about watering them if you're just bringing them inside. And so I do think you want to give them a little bit of a rest period. So I would bring them in. If you're going to be bringing plants inside, unless you have a dedicated space that you feel pretty confident bringing in pests and things into and not having a problem, I would give them a little spray with some insecticidal soap or something outside. You can look and see if there's ladybugs or anything on them. Knock them off first. And then I would spray it down, bring it in. You might even want to drench the roots or just turn the pot upside down and dip it in some soapy water, just to kind of mitigate how many pests you're bringing in, especially if you have other plants around. But then bring it in and then just slowly start cutting the water back. to me, is the best way to do that. And that's what I'll do. I'll plant these up inside, and then I will just slowly back off the watering over a month. You know, I'll water them once a week, and then once every 2 weeks. You know, I'll just kind of slowly back them off till they start to kind of just start dying off, and then I'll just let them naturally die off. And then after about a month or two, I will start just giving them a little trickle of water, you know, and then every couple weeks, and then once a week, and then, you know, maybe a couple times a week, and just watching and trying to keep the soil just kind of nicely damp without being wet. And that's what I do with them. Now, the size of your container, the amount of roots you have packed in there is going to affect how often you water, but you just want to kind of just slowly back off the watering and then gradually bump it up again. You don't want to just start pouring a bunch of water in when you want them to wake up, or you're going to just drown the roots because they're not ready to start taking that water up. They have nothing on top to draw that water out of the root zone. So you need to do it very gradually when you're waking them back up. So that went through a lot of the questions that I had on that last video. I combined a few of them because they're very similar, but hopefully that helps you out if you're trying to figure out what to do with your begonias this year. I've also had a lot of comments in that video of people who have used my videos of how to overwinter their begonias and found great success with it. So don't be afraid to try and overwinter them. And you can also, like I've proven here, take cuttings. I think I have a video on that. I'll try and link it for you. If you just want to take some leaf cuttings and grow them over the winter, do that. And then you'll have plants to put out in the spring. Or try the seed method. If you have some plants that produce seed, try and collect some seed and see if you can get some plants that way. It's always fun to experiment and play with your plants. So go look at your begonias, see what you want to do with them over the winter, or just buy all new varieties next year and have fun that way. So much you can be doing in your garden, and the main thing about gardening is you want to be enjoying it. So do what makes you happy, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.